My name is Ebenezer Safadu. I'm a business strategy consultant and a data specialist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the Power BI Guru series. And in this episode, I have someone who I consider a real guru, probably in the top 3 in the usage of the query editor. Those of you who are not too familiar with the query editor, you know, Power BI has 2 sides. We have the actual reporting side and also the query editor, which is for transformations. And today I have a query editor guru in the person of Melissa de Korte. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Right. So viewers, I have today one guru who, I wish you were in the prior discussions, considered herself not too much of an expert, but everyone in the industry and in the community have so much high regard for her. So, I would like her to introduce herself and what she does, and probably we can take it from there.
Sure. It's going to be a brief introduction because, like you already kind of summed up, not much to tell about me, I think. The fun stuff always happens inside the query editor, so we have to move to that really, really quickly. So, like you already said, my name is Melissa de Korte. I'm from the Netherlands, and one of my passions is solving practical problems in Power Query, using Power Query, the Power Query editor, or using M, the language that you can find inside Power Query. And I think that's incredible fun. I've picked up some tips and tricks along the way, and I'm always happy to share that knowledge and to help others move beyond the user interface if they choose to.
Wow. So prior to the interview, Melissa and I were discussing some things, and I got to find out that Melissa does not have any prior background in data science, programming, nothing at all. And I use this platform to inspire people a lot. And I believe that she is one person that would inspire a lot of people with her background. So Melissa, can you tell us your journey into data and how you found yourself here?
Yeah. So it feels like a lifetime ago, but I started my working life in a nursing home. That was my first job, actually. Then I moved on to a whole nother sector. I started working at a pre-press company. And from that, I moved to a sign maker. So I feel like I bounced all over the place. Finally, I ended up at the company that I still work for today. That's a company that produces their own products for core drilling and that kind of stuff. And that's actually where I had to rely on Excel a lot more heavily than I had done, obviously, in my previous roles. So I kind of learned there that I had a passion for working with data. And that's how my data journey started.
Wow. So, those of you who have been asking questions on how do I start data science, before data science was a thing, Melissa started with sign making, nursing home, and then started working with data. And one key thing is don't just go with the buzz. I always tell people, look for how you can help, or look for things that inspire you yourself or things that you enjoy. And once you get that right, you'll be surprised the tons of things that you can do in that circle. Like Melissa is saying, she found something that she loved doing. She loved working with data. And today, this is where she is without any prior background with data. So this is one thing that I believe that we can all learn from her story. And as she sends us through the Power Query editor, you really see somebody who loves what she's doing. And it's a part of her. I believe so. So Melissa, what would you say Power Query editor is? In your own language, what would you tell, let's say, anybody that you meet who is probably about beginning that, what is Power Query editor if the person asks you?
Well, I think we all here that it's the data transformation tool, right? So it's the place where you extract, transform, and load. Those are the three keywords. I only have one keyword to describe Power Query, and that's fun. So yeah, you do obviously, when you work with data, you have to bring that in. That's where the extract comes from. So you connect to a data source, and then you pull that data in. Then you have the transform actions. So you have to reshape that data into a format that's required for the analysis that you intend to do. And finally, you have to load that to a data model. So you can build the model with the data to start building out measures and all of that stuff to create, eventually, of course, a beautiful report.
Wow. So, I mean, so it's clear with what Melissa is saying that before you actually carry out any analysis, you'd have to extract the data, you'd have to transform the data in a way that is suitable for the software that you're about to use, and also load it into your model. And that is what the query editor seeks to do. And my question would be, how did you find query editor that fun? Because I mean, it's usual for people to find visualization fun. Some find DAX fun. And query editor, how did you find that fun?
How do I find that fun? Well, of course, I mean, you have to realize that it's a way to automate tasks. So when you get a handle on processing data with Power Query, you can automate tasks and make your life a whole lot more
easier,
fun, free, easier, right? And with all that saved time, you can learn to do more stuff inside Power Query to free up more time. So it's a repeating cycle.
Definitely. I'm sure Melissa belongs to the school of making life easier and therefore would work today to make tomorrow easier for her. Because once you've done all the automation stuff by transforming your data rightly in query editor, it makes anytime you get data, you can go to bed, more of automate everything in the back room.
Wow. Yeah, and also, I mean, I have to be honest, right? I love solving puzzles, and those two kind of meet. So when I'm challenged and I have something that I don't know the answer to straight away, it just piques my interest, and I want to find out how to solve that puzzle. So It's just a passion.
Passion. That's one thing that you see running through all aspects. If you want to be an expert in anything, find something you're passionate about and keep at it, because it makes it easier. Melissa was earlier telling me that there's always that mix between your work and your hobby once it's something that you're passionate about. So if you want to be an expert in anything, find something you're passionate about and keep learning. All right. So Melissa, help us through the UI of Power Query Editor, and then we can continue with the magic.
Sure. So let me see if I can share my screen. So let me know if you can see my query editor.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. So I'll zoom in a bit. Control-Shift plus if that works. Let me try that again. There we go. Awesome. How's that? How does that look for you?
Yeah, we can see clearly.
Perfect. So I'm kind of hoping to share some sort of a fast track to mastering Power Query, right? And that kind of starts with finding your way around the query editor itself. And try to think of it, I don't know, like walking in a holiday home for the first time, right? You want to know where the bathroom is, you want to know where the kitchen is, where the bedrooms are, you name it. Whatever it is, you want to know where it is, and you've never been there before, so you're going to walk around. And I think that kind of also applies to getting familiar with a new application, right? You have to take a look at it and explore. So it's very clear that, to me at least, that this is a Microsoft product. It has a ribbon, and there are several tabs there, and those tabs have all different kind of operations or transformations that you can access. And then there's the View tab, and I kind of want to pause here for a second, because it's very important when learning something new, or trying also to get more familiar with the language and the language flow of the Power Query language, is that you have that formula bar here visible on your screen. So if that's not the case, you can toggle that on right here on the View tab. So if it's not there, always make sure to activate it. And the same is true for the query settings. That's the thing that you see on the right of my screen. Just went away, and there it is again. In the query settings pane, you have the applied steps. And I was kind of scared when I first opened the query editor because there was no undo button, but you don't need one because you can X steps out in the applied steps pane. So undo, not really necessary here. So don't let that scare you off. All right. Let's see. What else can I tell you? Exploring the interface, right? It's more than just taking a look at the ribbon. Above it, you'll have a quick access toolbar. That's right here. And there's the tiny little button beside it. And that allows you to do nothing with the quick access toolbar, which is kind of insane when you think about it. So how do you add content to your quad? Well, you just have to right-click any of the elements on your screen, and you can add them to your quick access toolbar. So no matter where you are, on which part of the ribbon in the user interface, you can always have quick access to the items that you move to your quad. So in my case, I have the advanced editor attached to my quad. If I wanted to remove it, I'll right-click on that option, and I can remove it as well, right? I like having it there because it's not present on every ribbon, and I find that I need to go there quite frequently, or I enjoy spending time there. So I have it attached to my quad. Now, the other upside of attaching things to your quick access toolbar is that you can use your Alt key to get quick access to that as well. So if you press down Alt, you'll see that it gets assigned a number, a numerical value. So Alt 2, for me, that will open the advanced editor window. And you can place the commands there, right, that are useful to you, that you use frequently. All right. So at the bottom here, we have the status bar. And when you move over the status bar, you'll see that something kind of lights up in a darker gray. And when you click on that, you'll see that you can toggle on column profiling options, right, from the default top 1,000 rows to scanning the entire data set. So that's important if you want to tell something about the quality of the data that you're looking at. Inside the query editor, you're always looking at a preview of your data, and that preview gives you a limited view of the data that's in the entire model. So when you hover over that, let's see if that works, hover over that tiny green line, you'll see that, yeah, we do have 1,000 values here. We have no arrows and no empties. But when I close and load this query, I could get errors because, like I already indicated, we're only looking at a sample of this data.
Wow. I now understand something.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can toggle this on, of course, by to scanning the entire data set. And I'll do that. In this case, of course, I don't have any errors. It's very small data. But the thing is that you always have to remember to put that back, because scanning the entire data set always, it has some performance
issues.
Loss, right? So that's something that you need to consider. So if you want to check something, fine, turn it on, but then set it back again. That's my advice.
Oh, interesting. I just learned something.
So one more thing that I want to mention about our exploration of the query editor is that context menus are everywhere. It's a sheer context menu party inside the query editor. So when I right-click here in the query pane, I get options to create new things. I can create a new query, new parameters, or new groups to organize my queries inside the query pane. When I right-click on a query, I get another context menu. When I right-click a header of a column, I get a very large context menu. And I can also right-click inside an individual field and get a context menu. Now, this context menu, of course, is also considering the data type. So we have text here, and we have text filters. Now, when I right-click inside a date field, I get date filters.
Date filters.
Right, and when I right-click inside a numerical field, I get number filters. So this is all in context, which is awesome, of course. There are other, of course, context menus again. So when you right-click on an applied step, you get this menu. And there's one hidden gem. If your query is a table, like we have here, you can tell by the table icon in front of the query name, you get this mini table icon in the top left. And of course, that reveals a context menu as well. Even right-clicking that tiny green line, let's try that. That will get you access to a context menu as well. So it's literally full with quick access points to actions that you might want to take. So exploring the interface is more than just looking at what you see on the screen, but it's also right-clicking at some points and waiting to see what happens.
Wow. That's beautiful. I mean, there are things that I've never used, especially the profiling based on the top 1,000. I'd always wondered how I could profile all. And now I know. Thank you.
Perfect.
Wow. Would you advise on the view, apart from the formula bar, which other things could we check?
Yeah, for me, it's you need to have at least two things inside the query editor activated at all times, and that's the formula bar on one hand and the query settings on the other hand. You always want those visible on your screen. Then I do have a preference when it comes to the settings. So let's go to the file menu for a second there. Options and settings, and we'll choose options. On the global and data load, you can select to never detect column types and headers for unstructured choices. So this is the thing that I prefer because when determining data types, what the query editor does is it scans the top 200 rows and then determines, okay, you're either a text or some other data type. So you always have to validate and know your data to make sure that that is the case. Because what if the first top 200 values are nulls? So there is no data in the top 200. Well, then you're probably get assigned a data type any, right? So you still have to find out, is that data type set correctly, even if the query editor automatically detects that for you. So it can be in help, but you always have to make sure that it's assigned the correct data type.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for the UI experience. Now we know the apply steps. We know how to check for the formula and also how to actually change the profiling conditions. All right. So the next thing that I would like you to talk about is the language, probably the M language, just something brief on the M language and what it does for the query editor.
Yeah, the M language is something that you don't always have to write, especially when you get started. You probably won't have to write any code at all. Performing actions inside the user interface will generate code for you, and that will translate to a new step in the applied steps pane. So let's say I want to split out the strings from the numerical values here inside the warehouse code, right? There are a couple of ways you can do this, and I'll just do the most obvious one first, right? So tell me if you disagree with me, but I'll go for split column.
Split column, yeah.
Yep, and then I could go for by number of characters, right? I could do that. And let's say 3, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Only once is far left. Let's press OK. Wonderful. I get 2 columns. Now I can change that back, of course. So this is the warehouse code, and I won't need that one, so I'll remove it. Sounds about right, right?
Yeah.
Would you do the exact same thing?
Yes, I'll do the same thing. Probably do digit to non-digits rather than the characters.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Changing this step. So, all right, we'll do that as well. So split column, non-digit to digit, insert, that's fine. Does exactly the same thing, right? I can take out that step, so delete that, rename, remove. So that's your approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So that's one of the things that we need to be aware of, right? There are a million ways to do stuff inside the query editor, which adds to the fun. We've already seen 2 approaches. Now, let me illustrate another one. So I'll just remove these steps. I'll right-click that first step, and I'll select delete till end. So that will delete the step that I've currently got selected and everything that's below that. So delete till end. Yes, I'm sure.
There's also a new thing for me. I've never used that.
It's golden. All right. So here we go. So in my case, I would go to the Transform tab and select Extract. Extract first characters. I want to keep the first 3 and press Done. So I've done everything we've just done with 3 clicks in 1 click, right? And the result is exactly the same. So that's a part of the learning journey as well, right? Especially when you're like me and you're coming from an Excel background, we have the urge to do things column by column as they appear. And you'll find out that there are often better ways to do things inside the query editor.
Wow. Interesting. Wow. No wonder you are in love with the query editor.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. You can have so much fun here.
All right. So what about the M language? I mean, what is it with the M language and how useful it is for a beginner? Yeah. What will you tell a beginner to whether to learn or not to learn?
A beginner, I would tell to pay attention, but not to learn. It's more about familiarizing yourself with the code and with the language flow. You don't have to understand everything that's going on. So when we look at the formula bar that's at our screen, we've seen that the last operation or transformation that I just performed, it called a function called table.transform columns, right? Then it lists a name that we see right here, this, and that's returning a table that's returning this step. So it's referencing the previous step, and the previous step is this table. So this is the table that we're transforming using the function table.transform columns. Then we have something special going on, and that's where knowledge does come in. We have a list, because I see the list initializers, that's those curly brackets. And then we have, in that list, we have another list. So we have a nested list, basically. So first we have the column name. That's the column that we transformed. So that's the warehouse code column. And then for each item in that column, that's each keyword, we're performing this transformation, or we're calling this function text.start and then that underscore is referring to the value that's in that specific row. So we're doing that row by row across the entire column of the table, and we're extracting the first 3 characters. Finally, we're also assigning it a type. That's the thing that it's kind of giving it away. We used a text function, and we're also returning a type text. That's where the ABC in front of the column name comes from. It's a text data type.
All right. So with what you just mentioned concerning list, so how can we learn to recognize records, lists, and tables?
Yeah, that's something that I think will come later on, right? You will need to make progressions in your code or in the way you learn a new language. Like in the beginning, you probably don't have to pay that much attention. Just read the code that's inside the formula bar. Just try to get a feel of the flow of the language, right? I'm naming the elements because I know what they are. But if you don't know, that's fine. Just take a look at the structure of the things that you're seeing there, right? And try to make sense of that. You don't have to go figure it out or dive into the deep. Just peek at the code, basically. Familiarize yourself with a couple of basic functions. So you'll see a lot of table functions pop up, of course, because you're always working, most of the time at least, with tables. So the most common table functions will start to have or get a meaning to you, right? That's important when you're starting. Next, you'll see that some specific functions like text functions or date functions, they will pop up more frequently as well, right? When you examine the code that's inside the formula bar. So you get a feeling of the things that you're doing. And if you want to learn more, then you can progress to diving into specific function groups, right? To figure out, hey, what other table functions are there? Or what other text functions are there? And that's when you get to that next level.
All right. So thank you for that. Let's look at the transform nested values.
Right.
All right.
So this is just something that I want to share with you, with everyone else, I think, who doesn't have the skills yet to code, write M functions, that often or not, you don't need to. You just have to be a little smart about it in your approach. And that's where this example comes from, right? So what I've got here on the screen is I've got an index number, and beside it, there's a nested table. Now, I'll click off to the side so I can see the preview of the contents of that nested table down below in another preview section. And we see that this has some data, and this data needs to be transformed. We want to end up with a table that has one column with dates and one column with values. So if I want to transform this table, I can't using the user interface because this is a nested table. Now I can click, of course, on that table, but that will drill down into that specific element, and I'll kind of lose the rest. So that's not what I want. Instead, I'll right-click that white space and I'll choose Add as New Query. So now I've kind of zoomed into one example, and I've created a helper query that will allow me to generate code that I can transfer back to my other query once I'm done. So now I can use the user interface again to do the stuff that I want with this table. So for example, I don't need a description, so I'll remove that. Don't need the index. I'll remove that as well. So that generated this remove column step. Now I can flip this data on its side, giving me one column with dates and one column with values. So on the transform tab, I can select transpose. And now I can remove the blanks. Just remove that. Perfect. So this is looking much better. Now I want to do these transformations on all those nested values that we saw previously. So in that case, I'll just open the advanced editor window, and I'll zoom in here as well. Because the first thing we did was remove columns, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this all the way to the end because we did multiple steps and I'm going to need them all. So I'm going to copy this, Control C, right, and I'm done. Perfect. Now I'll step back to my other query, and this is where I'll add a column to this table. So I'll add a custom column. And all I'm interested in right here is getting that nested table. So I'll click on that, I'll bring that in, and I'm not going to bother doing anything here because I find it really difficult to format code there. So I'll open the advanced editor window again. I guess now you're getting to know why I have that attached to my quad, right? So, right. And I'll make some space. So let me also tell you what I'm seeing here, right? When I look inside the advanced editor window. So you have a let expression, you have an in clause, and in between there's a comma delimited list. So if we scroll all the way to the end, there's a comma there. We have a comma delimited list of variable names and expressions assigned to them, and those expressions return values. So we're generating a value and we're transforming that and bringing that along across all of these variables, right?
Yeah.
So I've copied a bit of code and I'm just going to paste that in here. Now, because, let me format this. Because I have multiple expressions like we've seen in the advanced editor before I edited any code, I'm going to have to create a nested let expression here as well, right? Because I have multiple value transformations that I want to perform on top of that nested table. So we've created a nested let, and it's giving me an error here, and that's because I brought a value in. That's the reference to the table that I want to transform. So I'm going to cut this, Control X, and that's why it's important to get a feel of the language flow, right? That first parameter inside the function, that's the value that you want to transform. And that value is the value that I already brought in. So that's the all rows column beside it. So that's this value. So I'm pasting that, replacing that, and now I can press done. Let's see if that worked. So I'll click off to the side in the white space again, and sure enough, that value has been changed, and they all have. So I can just keep this column. So I'll right-click that, and let's say remove other columns. And now I can extract my data. Perfect. Of course, I can rename my columns as well. I don't have to create another step because I can do that right here inside the formula bar. So it called expanding the column called this function. This again is the previous step. So that's the one that we're transforming. We're extracting values from the custom column that we created. From that table, we extracted these fields, and these are the new column names in the table that we're looking at. So if I want to rename them, I can just adjust them here. So let's call this date, and let's call that number. Press that check mark. Perfect.
Wow. 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 Can you do that once more, this time probably quickly, so you have a nested table that's a table inside other table?
Yeah, I'll step back.
Query. All right.
Yep. That's this one. Yeah.
Which has week ending and number of paid employees. But you want to expand this table because they all have similar things in there, coming from probably different weeks or different sources, but they carry the same information. But you want to transform it such that you get the information out there and be able to transform. So that is what you are taking us through.
Yeah, in order to do analysis on this data, you'll need a column with data and a column a column with dates and a column with values, right? You need that tabular format to perform analysis. So that's why we're working towards this end result, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it wasn't so much about the task itself. It was more about how to maximize your use of the user interface, right? By playing it smart, using it to your advantage, using what you know, and build from that. So you can already, with limited knowledge, you can only already do so much, right?
Yeah, that's great. And I think the next thing we'd like to know is about the shared keyword.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're progressing and moving, we're moving beyond what the UI has to offer, right? You probably want to explore those functions and get yourself more familiar with those. Now, you can use the hash shared or pound shared keyword for that. So I'll create a new blank query. I've just right-clicked it inside the query pane, select new blank query. And all I have to do is enter that pound shared. Let's see. Always confused. I'm really confused now. I'm having an off day. What's happening here, folks? Right, I know what's happening here. You're pulling my leg. You're treating it as text. Oh, this is not nice. Here we go. I'm going to do that over again. There it is again. Right, there we go. Delete that. Perfect. So using the hash or pound shared keyword returns a record. And you know it's a record because it has a record sign or symbol in front of the query name, right? So I'll rename this as well. Let's call this shared. Perfect. Now, working with records isn't going to be that much fun yet. So what you'll do is probably transform this into a table. So that generates another step. And now you have a column with names. Those were the field names previously, and a column with values. Now, if you want to zoom in specific sections, you'll probably want to filter that name column, right? So we'll do that. We'll do a text filter, and it starts with, let's do text as well, right? So text dot. All right. So that gets us a whole bunch of text functions for us to explore. And all we have to do if we want to learn something about that function is press off to the side in the white space, and we see the documentation of that function pop up below, right? It also has a small example. So it says, well, if you have a text hello world and you say what's at position number 4, then it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It skips 4. It's 0 base, so it's actually the 5th thing that that is bringing back, and that's a no. So awesome. Right. So this is a way to start learning more and discovering more about the M language and the functions that are available to you. Now, of course, this itself isn't that helpful. There are so many other functions as well, right? So I'll just copy what I see inside my formula bar, and I'll rename this. I'll rename this as well. Let's rename that. These are text functions. Right. I'll create a manual step by pressing that FX. don't need that because I've copied what I needed. And instead of text, let's look for table functions. Press that check mark. And I now get a list with table functions. So if I want to learn more about that, I'll just click off to the side in the white space, and I can see the documentation again below.
Wow.
So I'll rename this as well. These are table functions. Let's do one more, right? So I'll press the F6. I still have that step copied, so I'm just going to paste that. And let's look at list functions. Those are always fun. Right, so we now have access, quick access to 3 specific function groups, if you will. And you could, without moving anywhere, right, just disable this from load. And you could always, in your models, just have one query that references the pound or the hash shared keyword to have a quick way to look up some information about functions that you're working with, right?
Okay. So that's one way to learn M language, by always using the pound shared to know the functions that are being used in the M language, and you can learn them as and when by clicking on each one.
Yeah.
Are there functions for records? Because I saw list, I've seen table, I've seen test.
Yeah.
Are there functions for records?
Yeah, and I'll show you one more magic thing. So I'll go to the advanced editor window, and there's a question mark here. So I'll just click on that, and it seems to be opening on another screen. Let's see what's happening there. There we go. So here it is. Here's my browser. And you see that when you click on that question mark, it brings you to the online Power Query and function reference. So here you see all functions by category. So you ask for record functions. Are there record functions? Yes, there are. So I can click on that function group here as well. And there we have functions, record functions on information, transformations, selections, you name it. So this is also a way to get more familiar with the M language, right? When I started to learn more about the M language, I used to have the browser on one screen and my editor on another. It's whatever you prefer, right? And of course, if you select a specific function here, right, it will also show you that documentation. And sometimes the examples you see here differ from the ones that you find in the hash or pound shared. So you can use them both.
Okay. Thank you. How do I distinguish between a record, a list, and table?
Yeah, we're getting really advanced now. So, yeah, there are different types of values in the M language. You have primitive values, which are texts, numerical numbers, you name it. And then you have those structured types, tables, lists, and records. And often things come in a table, in a record, or inside a list. So we've already seen an example of where a list came in. And it is beneficial to start learning about those concepts as well as you progress. So as you progress, you might want to find out more about the language itself and learn about data types and operators, the let expression, everything that comes with the key concepts, right, in the language. So if you want to progress, eventually you'll have to go there and dive a little deeper. Let's start creating some structured values, right? Because you can also create them by hand.
Okay.
I'll just add a new blank query. And we've talked about records, right? Now records come inside square brackets. So equal sign. And a record usually has a field name and a value assigned to it, right? So we could say name, string, Melissa. Now, if I wanted to add something else, I have to enter a comma and I can create a new field name to add to my record. So equals, and then I could just enter something. I don't really care. Right, and that returns a record. So I now have a record that contains two fields, a name field and a number field, and each of those fields have a value assigned to them. So that's how you can create a record on the fly. And the same is true for lists. There are list initializers. We've already talked about those. Those are those curly brackets. So I'll create another new query and create a list. So curly brackets. Now lists are kind of funny in a sense that you can create a sequential list as long as the starting value is smaller than the ending value. So let's create a list that runs from 1 up to 5. That check mark. So we now have a list created with 5 values. And learning how to recognize what comes in lists and what comes in records is beneficial because that will allow you to make modifications to the code, right? So you still can use and leverage the user interface for, I don't know, like to its max, but just by making slight modifications because you know what comes in lists and what comes in records and how you can modify those, that's really beneficial and that will really skyrocket what you can do inside Power Query.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, this is the fourth magic that she's taught us, being able to recognize records, lists, and tables. These are all new to me. All right. The last thing that we're going to talk about, magic number 5, is smart filters.
Yeah. So let's talk about smart filters. Yeah, right. So here we go. This is a bit of magic, hopefully. So say we have this data and it's not really an outrageous example, but let's just do something stupid just because we can. So say I wanted to filter product number 1 to 5. So what you'll do is you'll deselect everything and you'll select product numbers 1 to 5. Don't know why you would ever do it, but that's not the point. The point is that we've created a filter. So when I open up the formula bar, exactly, thank you so much. We see the code here. So we've called a function by performing that operation, that selection, we've called a function called table.selectRows. Now again, we're referencing the previous step. So extract first characters. That's the table that we're bringing into this function, and that's the thing that we're transforming. And then we're saying for each row, tell me if the product code is 1, or the product code is 2, or the product code is 3, or the product code is 4, and so on. Now, there's another way to do exactly that when you build on your knowledge, right? When you've discovered things inside or about these M functions. Because what table.selectRows is doing is it's keeping everything that evaluates to true. And that's something that we can manipulate, right? So instead of this, let's do something else. Let's say list contains. I'm just entering the first 2 letters of list and contains, and that will get me that menu here, and I can select the function that I want. So list.contains. Now, what does it want? Let's see. Let's get that bracket again. It wants a list. Right. So I need, as first argument, I need to pass it a list of things that I want to look for, right? Now, we've already seen how to create that list. So I'll use the list initializers, and I'll say product 1 up to product 5. you're looking for, what's the value? That's the product code. Let's remove the rest. Don't forget the closing parentheses to the function. Perfect. Let's see what this does. So I'll press that check mark and nothing changes, right? I get the exact same result. But this is so much more robust and flexible, and that hard-coded list, faster would not say that initial. It doesn't have to be faster because you're still using table.select rows. But it's more versatile, right? And it's a way more simpler code to read than the one that was generated by the UI.
Yeah. Wow.
If I wanted to switch this selection around, right? Because we also know that it has to evaluate to true, right? So there's a keyword not. So if I wanted to switch my selection around, all I have to do is add that. So not. Press that check mark. And now I've got the inverted selection. So try to invert your selection when you're pressing items inside that selection box, right? It's impossible. There's no option to invert your selection.
Melissa, this was easier because it was numbers. What if you were filtering for the text, the warehouse code?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that if, say you had another query that had a column with a selection or a few warehouse codes, you could extract those unique values, turn that into a list, and of course feed that to list.contains. So it depends on where you want to get that list from, right? So it doesn't have to be numbers. I know that I picked a really easy example, right? But the same logic applies. It's not difficult.
All right. So the key was to generate a list using the query and then matching that against the actual query.
So let's, for example, let's try that, right? So I'm going to use this query just because we can. We're here anyway. So I'll right-click that header and I'll add it as a new query. Now watch what happens. It generates a list because I've zoomed into one specific column. Right now, I don't need this. I want unique values, of course. So let's do list. Let's do it my way. List distinct. There it is. Wrap that around it, press that check mark. Now we've got the unique values, right? Now I can transform this list, or I can make a selection or whatever. So let's say, what shall we do? I'll do list skip. I just want to create fewer values, right? So list skip. And I'm just going to skip the first two. So watch these, they'll go away. There we go. Now I've created a small list and I can use this in my other query. Now it's not really being fair because I'm wondering if I'm going to get an error because I'm referencing the same source.
Yeah.
So this came from that same query, right? So that will probably not work. But the thing is that I can use it. Let me create, I'll just create it on the fly. We're here. Like that. So new query. No, don't want that. There we go. So let's paste it in. What was the other one? I forgot. There we go.
Yeah.
Put in the equal sign and make those text. Right. So it's giving me a list again. So I'll call this list codes. There we were. So I can do the exact same thing, right? I'll just copy this bit of code. And I'll say create a new step. And so again, we're transforming the extract, the first character step, that one. So not the filter rows, but the extract character step. And list contains, I can now point that to my list codes, right?
List codes.
List codes. There it is. And then I don't have to reference the product code, but the warehouse code. Now they're in single square brackets. This is a field reference. And because it's a field reference, I don't have to use that quoted notation, although the names have spaces in them, right? So I can just write warehouse code. Hopefully I didn't make any errors. Let's see. Perfect. And you've seen that it now filtered down the rows. We can also see that here. Down below, we now have 472 lines in our table. So same logic applies.
That's quite interesting. The question I would want to ask is that if I'm to load a record or a list into the BI, what happens? Or I have to transform it into a table first?
That's a good question. Never tried that. Shall we find out?
All right.
Come on. So I'll disable that one. I'll disable this one as well. So we have a record. Let's call that record. It will try to turn it into a table, but we'll see. And here we have list codes, and this one will also load. Let's call that table. Perfect. Close and apply. There we go.
Ta-da! What's going to happen?
All tables.
Well, all tables. All right.
Yep.
At least now we know what happens.
At least we know for sure. Yeah, we've learned something. We've learned something new today, which is always nice. I love that.
All right. Wow.
So let's go back. Yeah. Thank you. That was fun.
So, viewers, I've been talking with Melissa de Korte, who is the world's leading Power Query expert, and she's been sharing 5 magic things in the query editor. It's interesting to know where her background, not even being in data science, a sign maker who is now teaching the whole world how to transform data. She said that it only affirms the fact that you can actually be whatever you want to be so far as you love it and keep on doing it. So thank you very much, Melissa. And hopefully we'll catch you on a special time to just help us how to learn the M language.
That would be so much fun. Yeah, definitely. I look forward to that.
All right. So viewers, we brought today's interview to a close. Send me any message or any question you have for Melissa, and I'll send it to her. And thank you very much, Melissa. So check her out on LinkedIn. She's excellent. She's an enterprise DNA expert, and I've always learned from her. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll meet for the M language schedule.
I look forward to that. Awesome.
All right. So viewers, subscribe to the channel. It's a software or Eureka Business Intelligence. And Eureka Business Intelligence is clarity through insight. So this is another Power BI Guru series, and catch you next. Bye.